The running back position is clearly one of the most important to having success in every single fantasy football league every single year. And today we're going to be talking through three names that I absolutely love right now. For me personally, these three players are must-haves in the second round of our fantasy drafts this season, and I believe there's a case to be made. Every single running back in today's video could finish as the top running back in fantasy this year. Each of these three players have massive room for improvement from their 2021 campaigns, and I think they have the dynamic capability and skill set to get things done this year. I post fantasy football content every single day across multiple platforms, so make sure to drop down, click that subscribe button, and turn the bell on so you never miss a new YouTube episode. I also strive to be the most interactive fantasy football channel here on YouTube, so if you have any questions for me about your leagues, feel free to put those in the comment section below. Kick back and relax, you guys. Let's get started. All right, here we go with someone who's been one of my absolute favorites all draft season long this year. DeAndre Swift has been a running back that I've been extremely bullish on ever since I can remember starting my analysis for fantasy football this 2022 season. I love essentially everything on the table here. I love the draft value. I love the upside. And I think the floor at this price is pretty dang good as well. You take a look at Swift in our 12-team formats. He is currently the RB8 overall, the fourth pick in the second round of our leagues, and the first player off the board of the three we'll be talking through in today's episode. I think the writing is on the wall here for easily exceeding this draft day price should DeAndre Swift stay healthy this season. I think his floor is somewhere in the RB5 territory if he stays healthy, because to be frank, his skill set possesses everything needed to be the top running back finisher in fantasy this year, or any year for that matter. He has the dynamic traits you look for in guys like Christian McCaffrey, who averaged 29.3 fantasy points per game in the 2019 season. If we take a look at DeAndre Swift here, there's a couple things I want to talk through from his 2021 performance and why I think that these numbers may be overshadowed and why these things can get better here as we approach 2022. First and foremost, the top thing I want to mention here is that in week 12 last season, DeAndre Swift got injured. This is a player that up until that point in time was producing very, very well for fantasy lineups. And had that injury not occurred, he would have been on pace to finish as the RB3 last season and finish above other players who, typically we think of your Austin Eckler's of the world, similar to Swift in skill set, but due to their ability to stay healthy, were able to finish in front of him last season. After that week 12 injury, Swift was used sparingly down the stretch of the season and wasn't nearly as involved as he was in the first 2/3 of the year. So that's first and foremost a huge deal there. Obviously, staying healthy, there's some luck to it. It's a big part of fantasy. Your availability is a skill. It does matter, and it is something that at the end of the day has a very drastic impact in how you finish at the end of the year. Obviously, this is a much more extreme scenario, but when you talk about Derrick Henry, he was doing unprecedented things pre-injury. He misses half the season, and look at him finishing all the way down there. I think he was like the RB30 or something last season, obviously because we didn't see him for half the regular season. So on top of that, some really positive markers here for why DeAndre Swift has the skill set, has the involvement in his offense to be this elite level producer. He averaged 4.7 receptions per game last season, which is absolutely phenomenal when you consider how valuable a passing involvement snap or reception is. Two different things there. But when you consider how valuable just a singular target is in a PPR format, DeAndre Swift is at the top of the game right there. He had a 20+% target share of the Lions offense. Now, there is a case to be made that could potentially dip slightly this season with the introduction of guys like Jameson Williams and the progression of guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who might take that next step forward this year, but Swift will still be very involved in that phase of the game. This is still a core player for this offense and one of the most, again, dynamic players at his position in the entire league. On top of that, the Lions have a top 10 offensive line. This is a group that really goes 5 wide with really, really solid names. I love their offensive tackles, Taylor Decker, Penei Sewell. You've got guys guys in the interior as well that I think are very, very exceptional. This is an underrated group. This is a team that, because of the lack of ability to have positive game scripts and not really have the opportunity to just grind teams out late in games and really control the fourth quarter, we haven't gotten to see the fullest extent of how that group can perform because, again, the game scripts have not been very good for this Lions team in years previous. So the last thing I want to say here is that despite the fact that that Week 12 injury occurred, the usage dropped off after that point in time, Swift still finished as the RB8 in fantasy points per game last year. So he did slide down the board about 5 spots. Remember, I said pre-injury, had you paced those games out the rest of the season, you're looking at an RB3 finish for him this past year. And this is a guy who had barely 1,000 yards from scrimmage, that being rushing and receiving yardage combined, and had just 7 total touchdowns. The area for progression and improvement is so extreme there. You're talking about a player who I think has the skill set to be 1,500 yards plus from scrimmage, a guy who could double his touchdown totals this season. All that really has to happen is the Lions have to get marginally better offensively, which I think they've done the things required to do so. Their defense has also gotten better as well. Hopefully they can hold some more leads. And then just getting him red zone opportunities, getting him touches in that critical area of the field to score high volumes of fantasy points, that's going to be key here. And I don't see why DeAndre Swift can't make those things happen for us this season. Saquon Barkley is the second must-have player I have here at the running back position in round 2. His ADP is just 1 spot below. Actually, their overall pick off the draft board is tied. They're both the 4th pick in the 2nd round. Barkley, though, the tiebreaker, whatever that is, on Underdog Fantasy, this is the ADP I use, of course. I think they're the most accurate in the game because of the intent behind every draft choice. Of course, there are no free-to-join leagues on Underdog. You have to pay an entry price for each draft that occurs. So in this case, again, that's where you're getting that accuracy and ADP from here. Whatever their tiebreaker is, though, DeAndre Swift takes the lead there, and again is the RB8. The RB9 here is Saquon Barkley, of course, and here we've got a few things I want to reference with him for this upcoming season. So Saquon Barkley, I pulled this really great stat from Fantasy Guides on Instagram. If you don't follow them, I highly recommend checking them out. A fantastic platform for some quick information on fantasy football. This is a really interesting one that, I just didn't take the time to cross-reference this for myself. But what they found there is that there have only been 5 running backs in the last decade and a half to average 24 or more fantasy points per game. And of course, Saquon Barkley is one of those 5 who did so back in 2018. Another one of those players is Christian McCaffrey, who was the RB1 in 2019 at nearly 30 points per game, 29.3 to be exact. I already referenced that once in this video. But the point being here is you have an ultra and uber talented player with all the potential in the world to potentially go ballistic in our lineups this season. Of course, you've got some injury risk, some Giants risk as well baked into the draft price here. That's why he's a 2nd round pick, not a 1st rounder. But this is still a value despite the fact that his ADP started in the 3rd round this offseason. It's vaulted, it's catapulted, it's skyrocketed since some players have started to uncover some of the facts about this Giants coaching staff, expectations for how Saquon's going to be used this season. And when you really look at Brian Daboll and what he brings to the table, of course, Brian Daboll is the new head coach for the Giants, coming over from the Buffalo Bills. One of the guys who was really, Sean McDermott, the Buffalo head coach, is a defensive side of the ball coach. So a lot of people attribute the success in the quote-unquote fixing of Josh Allen. Of course, a very wild and reckless player in his early days and now transformed into one of the best quarterbacks in the entire league. A lot of people attribute a lot of credit for that to Brian Daboll, who was the offensive coordinator for that team. Now, apples to oranges here, quarterbacks to running backs. However, Brian Daboll was in town in Kansas City for a very, very successful Jamal Charles, who set career highs in his rushing categories and obviously his overall fantasy production. He's a guy who has a lot of success with producing good numbers for fantasy football running backs. I think that Saquon Barkley can be considered and compared of the similar stature and nature of a Jamal Charles in terms of talent and explosiveness. And I think a lot of good things are going to happen for Saquon this year. You're looking at our offensive room right now. where there is virtually no competition for touches in that room for Saquon. He is clearly the number one choice to touch the rock on any given play. You've got Matt Breida in that offensive room as well. I promise you, he's not going to be seeing change of pace work when Saquon Barkley is already one of the most explosive players at his position in the entire NFL. The only thing he's coming on the field for is to give good old Saquon a breather after he rips off a 65-yard run right up the seam. So I just think the talent here, the situation of stability that I hope gets in place here with Brian Daboll, the fact that this offensive line and offensive skill room is seeing steps in a positive direction, they should be getting better this season. Hopefully, I don't expect Brian Daboll to fix Daniel Jones to the extent that he fixed Josh Allen here. It's, again, comparing an absolutely generational arm talent to kind of a Joe Blow by NFL standards, but someone who still has athleticism. Compare him to a Mitchell Trubisky with the Chicago Bears in 2018. I think you can really patch together a viable offense, and with a creative mind back there, hopefully get some sparks flowing here and some stuff headed in the right direction. But just a couple more things to note on for Saquon Barkley here before we jump into our last player for today's video. Again, no competition in that backfield. Massive room for touchdown progression this season. Just 4 total scores last year. Just having an average offense, going from average to, going from one of the worst in the league to average would do a lot for Saquon's ability to have some growth here. Offensive improvement, just again at a fundamental level, will go a long ways for what Saquon's able to do. That offensive line isn't nearly as putrid this season as it was last year, and just getting him back on track. I've talked about this offseason as well. I've talked a lot of Saquon, a lot of DeAndre Swift, of course. Hopefully those of you guys who have already watched this content can still appreciate this. I always try to add a unique spin and flair each time I talk about these guys. But here, I think that, and I've referenced these stats as well before, but Saquon's a player who we think of as one of the most electrifying and explosive players at this running back position in the league. And when you look at his numbers from last year, an explosive run rate, breakaway carry rate, they're very underwhelming numbers to look at for a guy that you kind of slap that tag on and have that expectation for. So that mental side of the ACL injury that I started talking about a couple minutes ago is something that I think is really overlooked by a lot of players. You talk about a guy who was rehabbing all year last year, may not have trusted his body to the fullest, and you kind of saw hesitation in the hole. He wasn't really willing to go full throttle and break away, and when he did, he looked fantastic, but it was just not as frequent of an occurrence. So something I'm definitely keeping an eye on, something I'm expecting to be better this season. I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about the situation for this season. And for those of you guys that want to slap that injury prone tag on him and, have your fear about that, the ACL, of course, we're a year plus removed now, which I think is a huge green flag in terms of it just not being something to worry about in the forefront of your mind. These are also some players who have been very successful in fantasy football. Just off the top of my head, that have had ACL injuries at the running back position to start with, Nick Chubb and Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook has been phenomenal post ACL, and at the wide receiver position, last year's wide receiver 1, Cooper Kupp, is a former ACL injured player, and Keenan Allen, another guy who early in his career had an ACL injury. So don't get too worked up about that stuff. This is a once-in-a-generation level talent, and if anyone can overcome this type of thing, it is Saquon Barkley. If you guys are looking for some additional help in your 2022 leagues this year, check out sizzlefantasy.com. That's where you can get access to all of the information for my draft guides for this upcoming season. That includes weekly lineup advice through our community Discord server. When you sign up for the draft guide via one of the 3 options I'll cover very quickly here, you're going to get access to me breaking down your teams and your lineups for as long as you're a member of that draft guide community. So first and foremost, if you head over to Underdog Fantasy, one of our awesome partners for this season, and sign up depositing $10 or more using promo code SFS, that's going to get you access to the website through this season's Super Bowl. The other option for that is the All Access Pass, which is a payment option on the website, but that's a little bit more expensive than if you just go on Underdog and sign up again and deposit $10 or more. They'll match your money up to $100. So you put $100 in, you get $100 for free free. You put $10 in, that's all it's going to cost you for the draft guides. You'll have $20 to play fantasy games with on their site. It's an awesome place. They have the best ADP in fantasy, and you really don't have to worry about managing your teams throughout the season because the computer makes the best lineup for you every single week based off the team you drafted. So again, Underdog Fantasy, code SFS on there. There's an affiliate link in the description of today's video that should take you right over there to get signed up. Otherwise, we do have that all access pass or a monthly membership on sizzlefantasy.com to again get access to those weekly lineup advice, personalized from me. That's stuff that I literally text you about in your direct messages. And we've got draft guide information on there as well. Sleepers, busts, must-own players, rankings, over 300 in-depth player profiles with information breaking down every player's situation in those top 300, in addition to our rookies for this season that goes above and beyond that 300 number. So over 500 total pages of content, a bunch of good stuff to check out there. All the links are in the description of today's video. And remember, code SFS on Underdog Fantasy. So Javonte Williams here, the last player I'll be talking through in today's episode, arguably the most interesting at this point in time. This is definitely a new face, a new name that we haven't talked through as much this season. So those of you who are true diehards here and have been sticking with the channel, watching every video, here's some fresh content for you guys, some brand new stuff that I haven't really talked through in the wake of some of the news and information that we have for this upcoming year. So right now, Javonte Williams is the 11th running back off the table in the second round. He is actually the RB11 and the 11th pick in the second round. And the big bombshell news we have out of Broncos camp is that they estimate, based off of the snap, divvying up from the coaching staff, from Coach Nathaniel Hackett, coming from the offensive coordinator position from my Green Bay Packers over to the head coaching position in Denver, a very favorable transition from Vic Fangio and that defensive coaching staff. You've got reports of a 70% split in favor of Javonte Williams versus a 30% split of the rushing workload for Melvin Gordon, which is obviously that big red flag, that daunting dark cloud kind of hovering over Javonte Williams' upside for this season. And I've been on record saying that I think Javonte Williams could finish as the RB1, if Melvin Gordon were not to resign with the team. That isn't the case, though. He came back. He met with Baltimore. I was really hoping he'd sign there because I already had my worries about J.K. Dobbins for fantasy this season in terms of redraft, but chooses to come back to Denver, gets a contract there for this season, and now you're looking at a situation where they're going to be in that split. However, this news is very favorable. Why? You look at last season, albeit Javonte's rookie year, he had just a 49.9% snap share of this offense in his rookie season back in 2021. So this is relevant, of course, because you're looking at roughly a 20% increase in opportunity. It'd be 21.1 to be exact, jumping from 49.9% to that 70% marker. And that's awesome stuff. Now, this is a training camp report. What do we know about training camp reports? There's a lot of hyperbole. There's a lot of unrealistic expectations. And there's a lot of stuff just tossed out there for the sake of saying it. So what would a reasonable person do? You should scale back those numbers a bit. Let's take a look at this situation. Should Javonte Williams be a player who, yes, is the favorite option in this offense, but maybe doesn't make it nearly to that 70% marker? Let's take the numbers he was averaging last season in a Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock-led offense, and let's pace that out, assuming, taking your statistical averages here and pushing up his involvement in this offense. That would pace him out roughly to an RB8 finish last season with that increased opportunity in workload and that offense, again, skimming some workload off of Melvin Gordon and some of the other players involved in that backfield. That's pretty good. Getting a top 10 finish as a rookie behind a very, it's a decent offensive line, nothing spectacular, and very, very poor quarterback play, not very favorable game scripts, and again, still not necessarily in a predominantly, soul-centered workhorse level offense. Take those numbers, you get a top 8 finish, and again, Bridgewater and Lock's offense. Think about, and this is 10% lower than what the report said, think about the opportunity and upside here with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson brings a whole nother level of dynamic in terms of the ceiling, the opportunity here, and exactly how high this entire offensive picture can fly here. You're going to have more red zone looks, more opportunities in, that critical area of the field to score easy fantasy points. You're going to have an offense that's going to be able to reap him more passing game opportunities. The more you're on the field for a skilled pass-catching running back, it's just natural. You're going to see more run in that area of the game. Again, that red zone number is what we're really looking at here, though. The opportunity to just average more points scored per game as an overall offense is invaluable, because that naturally means you're moving down the field more. You're sustaining more drives, less 3 and outs, less struggling offensively. I've talked so much about how excited I am about Jerry Jeudy. He's my most owned fantasy player this season because of the Russell Wilson acquisition, the combination of talent and opportunity here. Let's start getting excited about Javonte Williams. I was very pessimistic entering into this offseason because I wasn't a believer that he was going to be unleashed and unlocked this year. But you have to understand and account for the difference between Fangio's regime and Hackett's regime. Hackett may favor a true workhorse in a player like Javonte more so than Vic Fangio did, who obviously, as a defensive coordinator, they get a bad rap, obviously, for being kind of stereotyped as run-first offenses. I think this will be a very balanced team and a very balanced attack, but I think that in terms of the splitting up of carries, the division of labor here for this Broncos running back offense, I think it sounds like, and it looks like, especially from the reports we're hearing, things are swinging in favor of Javonte having a big breakout year here, and potentially, should he see enough volume, enough work, enough efficiency, enough red zone involvement, an RB1 overall finish. Now, I'm not predicting that to happen this season. If I had to take my guess, my swing at the plate here, DeAndre Swift's been my guy all year long, or at least all offseason long. I'm going to keep riding with him, but these are 3 must-have players in round 2 of our fantasy leagues for this season, and I highly encourage you guys to draft these players as well. If you guys enjoyed today's video, it'd mean a lot to me if you drop down, smash that like button. It helps out the channel a ton here. Another thing that helps me out a ton is checking out the links in the description of today's video. Take advantage of our different platforms. Check out the community Discord server. At a basic level, that is completely free. You can hop in there, chat with other members, join leagues, all kinds of fun stuff. Check me out on Twitter. Check me out on TikTok, Instagram. I'm posting stuff in those platforms and those areas as well. And of course, the big thing, check out the SFS draft guide on sizzlefantasy.com. We have a ton of content on there, as I stated. Code SFS on Underdog Fantasy gets you those guys for as low as $10, and you get 20 to play with. So really, you're paying $20 that you would have been using to play your own games and contests on there, and you can get a free draft guide along with it for this season. So check all that stuff out, you guys. I will see you in the next video. Peace out.